So good evening, everybody. Welcome to our second week of answering Venerable's quiz questions from the Four Establishments of Mindfulness. We had so much fun last week, we're going to do it again. But first we're going to set our motivation. So I've been thinking about what an incredible opportunity we have, that due to some amazing causes and conditions, we have garnered a precious human life, which means that we have practiced pure ethical conduct, which, considering the state of our world and our minds, is an incredibly difficult thing to cultivate and hold on to. So we've done that in previous lives. We've also practiced the 6 far-reaching practices. So ethics, generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration and wisdom over lifetimes to garner also this precious human life. That's one of the main causes for this life. And third, in those previous lives, we have made deep aspirations to have a precious human life, have dedicated all of our virtue for it, have thought about it, have made deep aspirations. And so here we are with this precious human life. And so we think about it as a dependent arising, changing moment by moment. And so we've met the Dharma. And then we think about all the thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people that have met the Dharma, maybe millions of people that have met the Dharma in a precious human life. And they didn't, the interest wasn't there. They thought it was kind of curious, maybe perked their interest for a short period of time, and then walked away to do something else. But we haven't, we're still here practicing the Dharma. The second thing is that we have met some amazing qualified Mahayana teachers. So there are those who have garnered a precious human life and have met the Dharma, but they have no teachers. They live either in isolation. Luckily for the internet, they may have access to the teachings via videos and audios and, teachings on the web. But as far as having a one-to-one personal relationship with a qualified Mahayana teacher, perhaps they have not been as fortunate as us. So we consider that to be even making this precious human life even rare. To have such a qualified teacher as Venerable Thupten Chodron, and also any other qualified Mahayana teachers, that they aren't just unqualified or leading us down the wrong path, that they themselves practice pure ethical conduct and the 6 far-reaching practices and hold the Buddha's teachings very impeccably in their own hearts and minds. And then to make it even more rare is that we do our best to follow those qualified Mahayana teachers' instructions. So think of all the beings that have met the Dharma, they've met qualified spiritual teachers, and there's just the karma that just makes them just obstinate and quarrelsome and refusing to pay attention, lazy, wander away, don't respect their teachers. And so then they lose an incredible opportunity. So we think of all the rarity and fortune that we've garnered by being here, either through the video streaming or here at the Abbey. And that because precious human life is a dependent arising, we have to continue to create the causes and conditions to have it. As Venerable said a few weeks ago, having a precious human life, this life, does not guarantee that we can just sit back on our heels and just ride that virtue till the end of our days. That if we don't continue to create the causes and conditions, that precious human life will cease. And we'll just have a human life with all the worldly fortune and perhaps status and whatever, but we won't have the Dharma. So now that we have this incredible opportunity, let's set our intent, our aspirations on learning and keeping our hearts and minds open to the teachings on the 4 establishments of mindfulness, knowing that this is a very profound and direct teaching on how to cultivate those qualities and understandings that we need to attain liberation and awakening, and teaches us very specifically what to abandon that gets in the way of those attainments. And so we do this not only for our own enlightenment, but for the benefit of all beings. Let's just turn our minds directly on that intention, for the benefit of all beings. So, for those of you who are joining us tonight, Venerable Children went away to Mexico for a few weeks, and she gave us a quiz, which we have found here at the Abbey is a wonderful way to check our understanding of this teaching that Venerable's been giving on the 4 establishments of mindfulness. And last week we got through, she gave us 11 of them, and we got through 4. So tonight we're going to continue. Venerable Chuni's going to start on number 5, and we'll see how far we go tonight. And once again, this is for us to be able to better our understanding and hold it more clearly in our minds so it won't disappear after a while. So these questions have been extremely helpful in helping to hold the teachings a little bit more securely and safely in our minds. So without further ado.
What is that ado about anyway? Further ado. Further ado. Well, we're, if you haven't noticed, we're also repeating last week's panel format. So we'll be taking turns coming up to the table to respond to these questions. But I get the next 3, number 5, 6, and 7, because they're all within the framework of how to meditate on the mindfulness of the mind. I also want to say that as I was working with this, I was really loving preparing for these particular questions. And the more I worked with it, the more I realized how very subtle and kind of slippery it is, which was also my experience in trying to meditate on the mindfulness of the mind. And I say trying to meditate, not that I ever actually did, but you know, putting my mind on really trying to follow these meditations. And so it is quite subtle and fine. So the question number 5 is, describe the ways to meditate on the mindfulness of the mind. So this is all sitting within the context of a few key things to remember. And one is that the mind has the nature of being the observer. And when we're talking about the mind here, we're talking about the 6 primary consciousnesses. The mental factors all fall under phenomena, so that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about the definition of mind being clarity and awareness. That basically the mind is pure like the sky, but it's obstructed by the metaphorical clouds or the mental factors, different mental factors. And sort of a basic premise is that the mind is really determines the difference between a living being and a corpse. And so on the basis of the fact that we are not right now a corpse, but in fact a living being, we can assume that we have a mind. It's an important place to start. Because once we start looking for it, it becomes questionable. But yes, we know the mind exists because the mind cognizes and feels. So how to be mindful of the mind? So there are 3 or 4 big title headings of different meditations of how to do it. And I say 3 or 4 because Venerable, actually, because of interruptions, ended up teaching this particular material 3 different times. And in the 3 are very clear, but in one of the presentations she says distinctly, and a 4th way to meditate is like this. So actually, I think we need to go back to her and get the really clear distinctions. So I've broken them out in these 3 or 4 ways. And then, as she always does, there is, within the subheadings, there's some really amazing sort of branch meditations that take you deeper and deeper into the analysis of each one of these headings. So I thought to do that in some detail, because I think it's actually quite helpful in knowing how to be mindful of the mind. So meditation number one, the first way to do it is to contemplate the mind of the past, which is already gone, the mind of the future, which is yet to come, and focus on the mind, try to find the mind of the present. And notice how quickly the mind of the present becomes the mind of the past. And see in meditation where you can find this present moment of mind. She said, try to watch the present moment of mind and see if you can catch it somewhere. Just where is it, and try to stay with it and watch that. So this practice of trying to just see this present moment of mind, really seeing it, is what begins to lead us towards seeing the mindfulness of the impermanent nature of the mind. And it also leads us into seeing how the mind is merely labeled. And that is actually true, as I looked at all these other meditations, that is actually true of each one of these. It leads to these conclusions, or it leads to these understandings. That we see the impermanent, the subtle impermanence, the changing moment by moment by moment by momentness of the mind, and we see how the mind is merely a label. And we're trying to develop a concentration so refined that we can see each moment as it arises and ceases. So it sounds really great. I mean, it does. I personally find it quite motivating to try to do this, but trying to find that moment of mind, or even being able to find the object, is a challenge. It's a long time practice. So that's the first one. The second way of meditating on the mindfulness of the mind is to look for the mind. Sit in meditation and see if you can find your mind. And, ask yourself, does the mind have color? Does it have shape? Is it in a specific place? Can you find a location? So these are all like qualities of form. So does the mind have these? And this is where there's many, many different ways of analyzing it that are quite interesting to pursue. And especially over the 3 different times of teaching this, she brought up a lot of different ones. So examining where the mind exists in the body under that idea, because it feels like the mind is in the body somewhere. So then, if that's true, then where is it? Where do we look for it? So she said, and this is certainly my experience, we generally think our mind is in the brain. So we sit with that. She said, put your brain out on the table. See if your mind is there. And we generally also, we grasp at the mind as being the person, as being the I. So if you put our brain on the table, like, is that me? We ask that question and really think about it. So if we're staying then sort of this other kind of investigation, if the mind is in the head, which it still feels like it is, you get a headache doing some of these meditations if you think too hard. If the mind is in the head, how come you feel the itch in your foot? What is that? Because the itch, or the feeling of pleasure, or the feeling of pain, or the sensation of hunger, that we think of them as body sensations, but it's really the mind that's cognizing and then interprets those sensations, right? So is the mind in the foot? Is the mind in the itch? Is the mind in the stomach when the stomach is hungry? Where is it? So we investigate that. Where do the sense consciousnesses exist? If I look out the window and I see Gautami House, where does that image of Gautami House Where is it cognized in the mind, in the body? Is it on the back of my eyeball? Is there some place in the eye that opens or closes and, gets the color and shape of that kind of triangular roof and that brown coming in? Where is it? And where is that for each of the sense consciousnesses? Where does hearing happen? Where is my ear consciousness? Is the gustatory consciousness in the tongue? Where do we actually smell? And have you ever had the sensation, this has happened to me, of having your hands on somebody who smoked really heavily and then tasting smoke? Tasting, right? What is that? Where is that consciousness? And even what is that in action? So really examining where are these sense consciousnesses. Another little mini meditation is, does the mind exist in the body as a whole? Is it throughout the whole body? And if that's so, what happens if you lose a limb? Do you lose part of your mind? Do people who have had the horrible misfortune of having part of their legs amputated also kind of lose a piece of their mind? And then she also related this contemplation back to the reflection on the 32 parts of the body that Venerable Tarpa talked about when we were doing the meditation on the body. The head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin. Thinking, going through each of these and going, is the hair me? Is the mind there? Nails? Is there mind there? And is that me? Teeth, skin, so going through all those body parts piece by piece by piece and trying to. Then a whole reflection on what makes the mind mine. What makes my mind mine? It's not yours, I know that. But how did it get to be mine? What does it mean to say that the mind is mine? These are all, every one of them you could just spend, lifetimes on. So here's taking it in a different direction. The mind is like a mirror. Okay, so we talk about the clear and aware knowing of the mind, right? So images rise, the mind reflects objects. The objects don't exist in the mind. The mind reflects them. So then examining, how does perception take place? How is it that something external, physical, is apprehended by something that is not physical? And where is the subject that is cognizing that external physical phenomenon? So, still looking for the mind. We think the mental consciousness is the personal identity. That's what we grasp onto as our self, our personal identity. And she said that's why we get so attached to our thoughts and ideas. Well, that's a good thing to know. When I'm attached to my idea, I'm attached to my personal identity. But then, are my thoughts me? Are my opinions, my ideas, is that me? Are my habits me? We think a combination of all those things are our personality. That's what makes up my personality. My personality is who I really am. But then under that same heading, what is a personality? What is a thought? Is the thought the mental consciousness, or is it the object that appears to the mental consciousness? Is the thought the object, or is the thought the subject? Good to think about. Is the content the thought, or the mind to which the content appears? I mean, that's where that's going. You know, can you have a subject without an object? Can you have the contact without the mental the contact with the object without the mental contact to which it appears? So all of that is under this looking for the mind. Lots and lots and lots of ways to really analyze that get at it from different directions and kind of take you deeper than those first questions of, you know, does it have color, does it have shape, which are pretty profound too if you sit down and think about it. But this goes into many, many different directions. And so the conclusion, she didn't identify these as conclusions, but in my looking through there, this is what I sort of summarized. Where this goes is that, you know, this meditation weakens the misconception of the mind being the actual identity of the self of the person. So you see the mind is formless, it's not material, and so forth. So, right. The meditation 3, which is very similar to the ends of these questions, was ask what is the mind? So I think actually it kind of blends in with these last questions about, you know, is the mind the subject or the object? Is the thought the subject or the object? But the kind of important point here is we need to be able to identify our own mind through our own experience, to identify the ultimate as well as the conventional nature. So the mind is not just a process, it's an agent. But it's not an inherently existent agent. It's not just the cognizing process that's going on. There is a subject. And that leads to the next major meditation, which I have marked as meditation 4, which is meditation on the mere, clear, and aware nature of the mind. Okay. So there's kind of a 4A, which is the precursor to being able to even access this clear and aware nature of the mind. Because she's talked about how His Holiness talked about how we're so normally engrossed with our sense consciousnesses. And even our mental consciousness is engaged with the internal objects of feelings. You know, we're so tied up with that, and that we can't see the mind itself. You know, and that the mind is completely buffeted around by the sense stimulus that we take in. And she used as an example, that day it was snowing. And she used an example, there's this, the eye apprehends white, small, out here in front. And based on that sense data, the mind immediately goes into responding how I feel about that snow, and then what's my story about it, and if I like snow, then it makes me happy, or if I don't like snow, then I'm irritated. And we actually talked about this a few days ago as we were walking down the hill because it was snowing again. And we had different stories about the snow 2 days ago at the very end of March than we did about the stories when she gave this example in January. So paying attention to, she said, in meditation, watch a small sense stimulation and see how it bounces back and forth in the mind. See how different thoughts, different cognitions arise, and see how our mind is controlled by what the senses perceive. So having that awareness prepares us, I think, and this is kind of my understanding of it, to then go into a deeper understanding of that, to try to access the mere, clear, and aware nature of the mind itself. But we have to be aware of this surface level of ricochet, bing, 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 in our response to sense stimulus to even be able to get behind it. And she had a little sub-paragraph, which was interesting for our monastics here. She said, this is why we have the training in guarding our senses as monastics. You know, and we keep our eyes lowered, and we don't hear everything there is to hear, and we don't, put our nose in every flower. We're doing our best to actually guard the senses from that kind of stimulation, because we're trying to subdue the mind. It's not to get rid of whatever pleasure we think we're going to have, but because it takes us away from our aspiration or goal to subdue our minds. All our stories, all our psychologies, all our stuff about our traumas as children, all that began as raw sense data. And so looking at that. So then, to allow the conventional nature of the mind to arise, we have two things. We have to stop remembering external and internal objects and events. Well, those are the two things. Stop remembering, so for keeping our mind out of the past and the future. Let go of dwelling there, and then let go of the feelings. Not dwelling on feelings internally, and let the mind be. Well, if anybody that's ever sat on a cushion knows how hard that is. Right there. Stop remembering the external and internal objects and events, and stop external objects and events, stop remembering internal objects like feelings, memories, all that stuff. And if we can do that, we might, she said, might get a glimpse of the clear and aware nature of mind. So then if we can prolong that experience, there's a kind of voidness, was the word that or kind of void, not voidness, a kind of void or nothingness, like a gap that stops the arising of mental elaborations. Sort of an experience of stillness arises that is just the present moment. And we sustain that gap, we might get a sense of the mere clear and aware nature of the mind. And that, only then will we have the object of meditation for how to meditate on the mindfulness of the mind. That clear, aware knowing, that is the object of meditation for this mindfulness. Subtle, slippery. And then we practice getting familiar with that experience. So that's the process of that one. And when you can do that directly, you can actually experience each moment of mind. You can have a direct mental perception of the impermanence of mind, of a moment of mind arising and ceasing. Right. But it's inspiring to think that we could do that. And so that's that question. Describe the ways to meditate on the mindfulness of the mind, which goes right into the next question, which is, how does being aware, where's my thing? How does being aware of the subtle impermanence of the mind reduce the fear of death at the time of death? So, through doing these meditations where we see in each one the mind is changing moment by moment by moment, And our concept of the mind as solid, and therefore our personal identity, falls apart because you see there's nothing there of any substance to base an identity on. So if we have that as something that's really familiar for us, at the time of death, the thing that is frightening, the most terrifying, is that we think we're going out of existence. We think we're disappearing. And so that's why we grasp so desperately to try to hang on to ourself that we think is vanishing. But in the process then of understanding that a moment of mind doesn't endure, and being able to see the moments of mind arising and ceasing, we also have the very kind of deep internal experience that although a moment of mind doesn't last for a moment, the next one keeps coming. So we really know that the mind, or the continuity of the mind, is indestructible. And so that fear that I am going out of existence is mitigated because we know the continuity continues no matter what. Of course, that depends on how tightly we're holding on to the I who's going out of existence. So that's the second part. So by seeing in these meditations how the I is imputed upon the mind, we get more and more familiar with the reality that there is no solid anything that is the I. So we get that the mind is arising and ceasing like it always has, since beginningless time. And so it will continue at the time of death. And also we get that the I is merely imputed in dependence upon the mind. The very thing that we thought was I has never existed. And so who or what is, quote, dying? This is something that we're familiar with. And so dying is then a breeze. Hard to imagine, but that's what they say. And she did say, that doing this meditation over quite a long time and getting really familiar with it is a relief, which I can well imagine. It's really a relief to get that, there's nothing there to cling to, there's nothing there to defend, there's nothing there to, wow. And so there's nothing there to die in that way, in the way that we are so terrified of. It's changing moment to moment. Which leads also right into the seventh question, which was all part of this teaching too. How does meditating on the mindfulness of the mind lead to understanding true cessations? So, as has been kind of evident, the meditation weakens the misconception of the mind being the actual identity of the self, of the person. It helps us let go of clinging to a personal identity and then inspires us to meditate on selflessness to learn more, which leads to understanding more about selflessness, and this is true cessation. There was also a little piece that she was talking about in this meditation on the clear and aware knowing of, clear and aware nature of the mind that I thought was very helpful. So that when we can see that, then we can see that nature of the mind itself. Then you actually see and experience that the mind is free of destructive emotions. That the very nature of the mind is not the emotions. It's not the positive, the virtuous qualities either. It's just not, the nature of mind is not emotion. You see that the actual nature of the mind is neutral. And so when you see that, then that teaching that the afflictions are adventitious is not just a teaching anymore. It's like you know that. And so with that deeper conviction based on experience, then the the conviction that all these afflictions can be eliminated gets really stronger. And we pursue that. We pursue the understanding of what is it that's causing them. It's the ignorance. We turn the wisdom mind to that ignorance, and that leads us to true cessations, based on the experience of really understanding what the mind is. I just think that's so brilliant. Also a relief. So also we see that our thoughts are momentary and fluctuating, which we've also seen, which helps us not to take them so seriously. We see how they're dependent on causes and conditions. And then seeing that, we turn our wisdom to examine the causes and conditions that make those afflictions arise, and that also antidotes us so that we are leading ourselves to true cessation. So I don't know, for me, actually studying these is why it was so kind of fun. Although, as I said, the more I went through the material, the more I realized I didn't really know what it was saying, because it was so subtle and beyond my experience. But also it gives a lot of, I don't even want to say hope, but I don't know, to think that there could actually be an experience of the fact that these teachings are so, to sort of, to deepen the conviction is really inspiring, and I think it's something I would like to, pursue, which is the point of taking these teachings, right? So anyway, does anybody have anything to add on or questions on those? I probably can't do anything with questions, but anything to add from your notes or thoughts about those teachings, those 3 questions? Okay, then I will pass the talking stick.
Little umbilical cord. So then, after this wonderful explanation on the mindfulness of mind, we then move on to the 4th of the 4 establishments of mindfulness, which is the mindfulness of phenomena. So question number 8, and I have to say that it took me a while, and I'm not even quite sure I understood what Venerable wanted in this question. The first part was easy, which was what does phenomena principally refer to in the mindfulness of phenomena? So she wanted a definition. But then she said why. So I wasn't quite sure. She said, well, why is phenomena, why are mental factors phenomena? Or why do we meditate, or why is it important to meditate on the mindfulness of phenomena? So I wasn't quite sure what the why was about. And I talked to John, and we just kind of, put our heads together, and I think I'm on the right track. But what I wanted to do was to talk a little bit about phenomena, and kind of get a little bit of, to bring some clarity into what exactly phenomena is and where mental factors sit in this huge, vast category, which is basically everything in existence is phenomena. And within this vast, limitless category, there are 3 kinds of phenomena. So the first one is conditioned, which are the ones that are form, objects, and consciousness. The unconditioned, which includes things like nirvana, liberation, and emptiness. And then this very interesting category, which I'm still not clear about. I was looking for the definition of it, and I couldn't find one that I could understand. They're called abstract composites. And during the White Tara retreat, Venerable gave 2 examples. One of them, during the White Tara sadhana, she said when there's a part of the visualization where White Tara puts out a hook and draws in all the life force that has been scattered or lost, life force is an abstract composite. And then in a teaching that she was giving on Shantideva's Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, she also mentioned that the seeds or the latencies that are planted on the mind stream due to karma, those seeds, she says, remember those guys? Those are also abstract composites. So they're not form, they're not mind, there's something else. And that's all that I can say. So phenomena in this particular teaching refers principally to all the mental factors that are not feelings. And these mental factors go into either the virtuous or the non-virtuous category, and they're all the states of mind that arise within our minds. The mental factors fall into the conditioned phenomena category because they arise due to causes, and they're impermanent in that they change moment by moment. So mental factors like the body, like feelings, like mind, are contaminated, conditioned phenomena because they are created under the control of ignorance and karma. Okay, so there we've got this nice string. We've got mental factors are contaminated, conditioned phenomena. Impermanent, created due to causes and conditions, and the major propelling force of their creation is ignorance and karma. I've also listened to some of her teachings that she says there are actually conditioned phenomena, and also this contaminated conditioned phenomena are in the nature of dukkha or unsatisfactoriness. However, the wisdom in the mind of a Buddha is a conditioned, impermanent phenomenon, changing moment by moment, existing, arising due to causes and conditions, but it's not created by ignorance and karma. So they're actually conditioned phenomena that are not contaminated. Okay, so then we've got the mental factors in this phenomena category, and they themselves are divided into two classes. You know, we always have these categories and lists and numbers of things, so we're just going to continue with that. The first class is the purified class, which are the mental factors that we need to adopt to attain liberation and awakening. And there are 55 of those, and those are the ones that contain all of the mental factors like love, compassion, wisdom, skillful means, as well as the 4 measurables, the 6 far-reaching practices, the 8 emptinesses, the Eightfold Noble Path. There's a huge list of all of these states of mind that we want to adopt in order to attain liberation. And then in the impure class, or I like to think of them more as the afflicted class, there are 53 of those, and that's where we put all of the anger, the jealousy, the wrong view, the 6 sense powers, the 12 links of dependent arising, etc., are in that class. And these are the ones that we're to abandon to attain liberation and enlightenment or awakening. So that's kind of the idea of what phenomena in general are and how phenomena refer specifically to the mental factors. So then we get to the question of why. And the best that I could come up with answering this question is that I went to the observed object part of the text, where the compendium of knowledge by a Sangha, where he describes the 4 different objects of observation, what they are, which he says the bodies, the feeling, the mind, and phenomena. And they all have to do with this misconception of the inherently existent self. So the first one, it says, the reasons these 4 objects, the phenomena being the 4th one, are stated as the observed objects is to stop the childish, which is us, ordinary beings who have not realized the emptiness of inherent existence, from first grasping the body to be the I or the self, the feelings to be the source of the enjoyment of that inherently existent self, the mind, as Venerable Chinny just very clearly, succinctly explained, that we misunderstand and think that it is the actual self, and that these mindfulness meditations are to disengage and dismantle that, and that the phenomena such as attachment as afflicting the inherently existent self, and then phenomena or mental factors such as confidence or faith actually purifying the inherently existent self. So this meditation is to help us stop grasping at something inherently existent, which is how we perceive most of these mental factors. We call them emotions also, that they are afflicting or purifying some sort of truly existent, independent, concrete self. So we've got a lot of this self-grasping, this misunderstanding, not only of the self as being inherently existent, but also these mental factors. So we have, these ideas when we have these emotions and these mental factors arise in our mind. we reify them and we immediately put them in the categories of either this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, this is appropriate, inappropriate. This causes pain, this brings happiness. So by doing that and identifying them as being sort of the cause on why I am feeling the way I do is because we misconceive them as being inherently existent and responsible for this concrete self's misery or happiness. And so the whole point of meditating on the mindfulness of phenomenon is to slowly through time, going through, how do I perceive these emotions? How do I have them as part of my identity? How do I describe myself as who I am, depending on how I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, through these conceptualizations of what these emotions are. We break the mind, these mental factors, down into different parts. We just say, where is the inherently existent self that's experiencing these? How do they arise? And we begin to loosen the concept of a solid I. The mental factors are not the mind. They're adventitious, as Venerable Chuni had said, and yet they pervade the mind. So at times we really do believe that they are part of the self, that they are part of our minds, when in fact they arise due to the ignorance and the karma and the self-grasping at the inherently existent, the inherent existence of the emotions as being something solid. The self is not any of these mental factors. And we eventually come to realize that there is no inherently existent mental factor to abandon nor to adopt, and that there is no self abandoning or adopting. Now, this is on the ultimate level. Conventionally, there still is this, dependently existent self. These mental factors arise due to causes and conditions in a mind that merely labels them. But yet there is no self, there is no liberation and awakening. There's just this merely labeled mental factor arising in this merely labeled mind, bringing about, eventually, the merely labeled awakening of ourselves and others. So we are very identified with these mental factors, and that's part of the meditation's purpose, is to start disengaging ourselves from how much we identify with our emotions and how much they are the source of our suffering and our happiness, and that the establishments of phenomena actually coincides with the fourth noble truth, which is the true path. So it's become, and there is following this, there's a question on how the meditating on the mindfulness of phenomena actually leads us to the understanding of the fourth noble truth. So I won't put that onto mind. They're very, very closely aligned. So that is what I had to describe on what are the phenomena that we're referring to in these mindfulness practices, and why we need to do this meditation. So
Can I help you with abstract phenomena?
Yes, please. Abstract composites?
Abstract composites.
Yes.
Yeah. So the abstract composite examples that I think are the most common, they talk about democracy or time, those kinds of things. So their existence, time exists, but it's not form, it's not consciousness, and it's not whatever space those things are called, space and emptiness. Yeah, it's not those. So it's those things that really exist, like that are conceptual, really, but anyway,
not
like that. But they're not form. Communism is not form. Communism is not a consciousness, but it exists, like that.
Can you clarify about space and in my confusion, that abstract composites include
Because
I don't think
emptiness
so.
is in the unconditioned phenomena.
Yeah, unconditioned.
So it's not in
Yeah, I didn't see that. Permanent, unobstructed space. Unconditioned means arising due to. I didn't see it in that. Well, I only saw about 4 or 5 things in that list.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
negation.
negation. like nirvana and liberation and emptiness.
And then I have a question from someone online for Venerable Chini's response. And this question
Okay.
is, if we are resting in the clear and aware nature of mind, have we gone beyond conceptualization?
If we are resting in the clear, aware nature of mind, have we gone beyond conceptualization? For that moment that we are resting, I think yes.
But not beyond cognition.
Yes, as Venerable Tarpa says, not beyond cognition. So it's not the end.
It's not blank.
Yeah, it's not the end.
Because cognition can be both perception and conception.
I don't know. I need Tarpa for that. Yeah.
So if it's the direct perception, we've still got cognition going on.
Yeah, that's true.
They kind of break those up differently when they start talking about this.
Yeah.
Well, I had read that recently about the different formula.
As far as I know. Yeah. John? And Venerable Jigme, you just, shall we all trade chairs? Listen to him. I'm going to leave.
Oh.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I think
It's the right hand.
this way will work. Yeah. Okay. So someone asked online who's been speaking. So in case other people are wondering, first on about the meditations on mindfulness of mind was Venerable Chokyi, and then last on the mindfulness of phenomena was Venerable Semke. And now this is John speaking, and I will try to go through this relatively quickly. The next question number 9 is, what is the question?
How do we meditate on the mental factors?
Thank you. How do we meditate on the mental factors? So in a general sense, we meditate on the mental factors by studying them and then contemplating their meaning. And this isn't done in a superficial way, but we have to really be able to understand these in our own experience. I think it's really essential that we don't underestimate the importance of developing a really clear understanding of these mental factors. In a sense, it's kind of like what we're mostly concerned with all the time, these mental factors. Whenever we speak of people in terms of their good qualities and bad qualities and say, I like this person because they're kind and generous and compassionate, I don't like this person because they're, so arrogant, or they stuck in their own views, or they're angry all the time. Those are their mental factors. And we think about them a lot, more than other people than ourselves maybe, but now we're turning the attention inward. And we have to really start to look and be able to notice their subtle activity as they arise moment by moment within our minds in order to prevent ourselves from being completely overwhelmed by afflictions. So we have to understand the mental factors that are to be adopted and then those that are to be relinquished. So to meditate, first we identify the deluded mental factors and their harmful effects. Then when we identify the virtuous mental factors, we don't have to just keep it to the 11 that were on the list. And remember, last week we spoke a little bit about that list of 51 mental factors. And of course, those are just kind of primary, really common ones that play a major role in our lives. But we also, in looking at these virtuous mental factors, can think about the 6 perfections, the 6 far-reaching practices. And we observe our minds, and in a slightly different way than in the mindfulness of the mind meditations. So here we're observing our minds to get a sense of what it feels like when these different mental factors arise in our mind. So this is kind of more gross than the clear and aware nature of mind, but of course, all these mental factors are arising within this clear and aware nature of mind, and they themselves have the clear and aware nature of mind, but they're distinguished, discerned in a different way. And we actually can, when we really start to look at what's going on within our minds moment to moment, and we really study what the mental factors are and study them again and again, and really, read the words and read the definitions, read their functions, and then examine in our own minds, what we can correlate in our own experience to the words we've read. Then they start to get subtler and subtler, and we can actually look more deeply and see kind of, even though there are 51 that are talked about in most of the Tibetan Buddhist texts, there are many that are either composites of those or little pieces of those. And so it's like when, we talk about looking at matter, and, you can go deeper and deeper, and you have a molecule, and then you keep looking, and you have atoms, and you keep looking, and you have protons, and neutrons, and electrons, and you keep looking, and you have muons, and gluons, and bosons, and fermions. So we can really see, we can make a lot of different distinctions within the different tiny blips of mental events, mental arisings that happen in our minds. So as we're getting a feel for what they are like when they're present, we notice how all the afflicted mental factors make the mind unmanageable and unclear and restless, and just not pleasant usually. Although it might seem like pleasure sometimes, but if we really are observing carefully, there's agitation. While the pure mental factors make the mind very clear and vibrant and energetic and perky and bright. And again, when we observe these mental factors, we also are led to this understanding that there isn't an inherently existent self, as Venerable Samke mentioned, that's going to experience the benefits of them or the drawbacks of them. None of these mental states are an inherently existent person or belong to an inherently existent person. So that people have talked about already. In order to actually do this meditation and become aware of these mental factors, some of the key mental factors that we need to have cultivated or be cultivating are mindfulness and introspective awareness. So Venerable Tarpa talked about these in quite some detail last week. So here we're actually directing the mindfulness and introspective awareness to our minds, but to the mental factors as they arise moment by moment. So the object will be different each moment, or depending on what's going on. So then, as we are watching our minds and observing, we can examine these mental factors in terms of their causes, their natures, their functions, and their results. And so again, when we're examining their causes, we look and see which conditions and causes need to be present to bring them about. And so like Venerable Chidi mentioned with the snow falling, we can kind of watch and see how our mind gets buffeted around by all these sense objects. And then of course the previous mental factors that were in our mind also are substantial causes of the new mental factors arising. And doing this really helps us to understand how our different states of mind come about, because a lot of times we impute or we put the cause of our mental states on external objects or external people, and either good or bad ones. I have a good Dharma friend who had been contemplating ordination, and he recently emailed me and said he met a girl, and she really brings out a lot of his good qualities. And I rejoiced in that, of course, but then I thought, well, is it really her that's doing that? Could she? So this meditation, and again, studying what the mental factors are, really allows us to know when they're arising in our mind and what really is there, that's the immediate preceding cause. So then that's their causes. The nature just refers to how they actually feel in us or how they appear to our mind. So of course we can read a description of that, but that's really where we're going to have to get the feel for it. And their functions are their role that they play in modifying our experience of an object, or the role in relating with other mental factors. And then for their results, we examine which types of actions that they lead us to, or the other mental factors that arise resulting from them. So then we continue observing and gaining familiarity, and then we practice cultivating those that we've ascertained to be constructive and beneficial for us, and those that fulfill our spiritual aims, and then we counteract those that function to destroy our wellness and virtue. And that's really the Buddhist path. That's the practice. So we're working with these mental factors constantly. And it's really not sufficient, like I said before, to just intellectually understand these, but we have to actually be able to identify how they feel in our own experience when they arise in our mind. And I think if people are interested, of course, you can go online just to look at some of the explanations of these and definitions and do a search. But if you want to look for specific books, there's a really popular one that's quite good called Mind and Mental Factors by Gyaltsen. And there's a newer one that was recently published. I think it's published under the title of The Inner Science of Buddhist Practice, which talks about a lot of different topics, but this is one of the primary topics that's treated there.
Who's the author?
Well, it's published under the author name of Artemis B. Engel. Yeah. It's actually a commentary by Stiramati on a text by Vasubandhu with some other material. Yeah. So then there is also some other meditations that we do in relation to the mindfulness of phenomena that are related to eliminating specific non-virtuous mental factors. So we can try to detach ourselves from the 5 sense objects that sentient beings seek in the desire realm, and that eliminates our attachment. And we'll be able to notice when which sense objects set off which states of mind. And then we can set them aside and cultivate a wisdom relationship with them instead. So then we're not going to be so buffeted around by the different sense objects. Another practice to do is to meditate on the disadvantages of anger and the advantages of fortitude. So that's working with one specific mental factor. And then through doing this meditation, we'll develop intention to not engage in reckless actions. We also develop the intention to dispel laxity and excitement, which are primary hindrances to meditation. We can examine whether the 3 jewels exist or not, and as well as if karma and its effects operate, and if there are past and future lives. And those 3 contemplations dispel doubt. And so it's really interesting to really gain awareness of these, and then, like I said, we get a little clearer understanding because we're always working with the afflictions, but a lot of times we just think of like the 5 poisons or the 6 root afflictions. So we're watching for attachment, aversion, pride, jealousy. So when we have this more complete structure of the different states of mind that we fall into, then even if there's maybe not a gross, like vivid state of anger, aversion, then we'll still be able to know, okay, well maybe there's a little resentment arising, maybe there's a little bit of spite, some of these like mental factors that comprise or are byproducts of or parts of anger, but maybe not full-blown anger. So it really helps us to really abandon even the subtler negative mental states, the non-virtues, and to accumulate or to reinforce the positive states. Yeah. So are there any questions? Yeah.
Could you repeat the thing you said about the results? The causes, nature, functions, and results?
So I think it just means that we are trying to analyze or examine these mental factors to see which types of actions that they lead us to. So like when attachment's in our mind, what do we then do?
Yeah.
Or what other mental factors they give rise to?
And what about functions that might come past? You said the role it plays in...
In modifying our experience of an object or in relating with other mental factors.
Okay.
So I mean, it's like intention, its function is to like direct the mind or to direct the mind towards an object. It's like they say, it's like a magnet pulling iron filings. So that's like we say intention or volition. And so that's just like the function. It allows us to become aware of the objects. And then the attention kind of like hones in on a more specific part of the objective field and really, bends or makes our mind gravitate towards that object. Attachment's function is to exaggerate, like Venerable Chokyi was talking about earlier, BBC, exaggerate the positive qualities of an object and to want to possess that object. So these are the functions, how they influence ourselves, our minds, in relation to the objects around us and other mental factors. Any other questions?
Tom, I have just a thought about that question about whether, back to the question that was come to me about whether that's the beyond conception. It's beyond discursiveness, but I don't know.
Yeah, I actually had a
Beyond
thought.
conception.
Well,
I don't know.
yeah.
But all I can say for sure is that it's beyond discursiveness.
It seems like when you were talking about it, like you were talking about it in terms of if you were to have a direct mental perception.
Yeah.
So if you're actually if you're in a state of samadhi where you were having direct mental perception, then at that moment there wouldn't be any conceptualization.
Yeah.
But it seems like as long as you're still within the conventional nature of the mind, which is its clarity and awareness, that's not the ultimate nature of the mind, which is the emptiness, then coming out of that, of course, there would be conceptuality. Of course, there would be if you were in a samadhi on emptiness too. So it's not like you're completely beyond conceptualization forever from that at that point. But maybe during those moments.
I'm sure it depends on the level of your concentration.
Yeah.
Doing that meditation, so.
Seems like it.
So, yeah. Anyway.
Thanks. Kind of late, so we can dedicate.